can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Mike Palmer of Sigma Computing. You can check him out at sigmacomputing.com. Mike, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. Since this is part of the top SaaS series, I had one of the co-founders of Zapier on, Wade Foster. That was a really interesting interview on how they've grown Pipedrive. Also, at the time, Mike, I think they were 10,000 customers. Now I think they're over 100,000. So they've grown quite a bit. And I had David Bitton of Doorloop. They have a SaaS company for property management. It's a property management software. It reminds me a little bit about your story, but they raised over, in a very short period of time, grew to 200 staff, raised $130 million, and he talked about his SaaS growth playbook. And it was really interesting on how they grew. Just so many favorites. Jotform founder talked about growing to 25 million users and why they had a free version, because I'm like, that's expensive to have a free version of this stuff. Yeah. People using it. That and many more at InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise25. Rise25, we help businesses give to and connect their dream relationships and partnerships. We do that in two ways. One, we're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. So we do the strategy, accountability, and the full execution and production behind the scenes. We also, number two, are an easy button for companies gifting. So we make gifting, staying top of mind to your clients, partners, prospects, and even staff from a culture perspective. Very easy. You just give us the list. We'll do everything else. We kind of might call ourselves the magic elves that run in the background to make it stress-free for the companies. So they can build amazing relationships and they can focus on running their business. So, I mean, for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. And over the past decade, I found no better way than to profile the people I admire and send them sweet treats in the mail. So you can check them out, rise25.com, or email support@rise25.com. I am super excited to introduce Mike Palmer. He's a CEO at Sigma. He makes data exploration, analysis, and business intelligence accessible to everyone. He has more than 2 decades of experience in technology, developing solutions for enterprises, startups like Veritas, the Totality, and more, and Fortune 500 companies like Verizon, Seagate. And Mike specializes in helping companies transform, grow, and scale. And that is like, that sounds like transform, grow, and scale. But when I talk about what Mike and Sigma has done, like, that is truly the definition of what you and the team have done there. Because in the past few years, I think 3 years, they've gone from $2 million ARR to $100 million in ARR. Okay. That's crazy. Like, that's amazing. And they also raised a $200 million round of funding as well. So it's been a crazy journey, Mike, and thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. And it has been a crazy journey.
And I, it's fun to talk about. I mean, on the surface, it seems like, oh my God, this is amazing. But there's always, when we go back to those really hard times, it doesn't look like it does now. So we'll talk about the journey, but I want to start off with Sigma Computing and what you do, and I'll pull up the website for people to see as well. So just talk about Sigma, which is, on the website, it's Enterprise Business Intelligence and Spreadsheet UI. So talk about Sigma.
So what Sigma was built to take advantage of was the migration that customers have been going through, both to cloud, but also ultimately to cloud data warehousing. So think about products like Snowflake and Databricks and BigQuery and Redshift. And we wanted to build something that made that transformation not just an infrastructure transformation, one type of database for another, but rather the way that, like, every person, the 90% of people who are not technical at your organization, that they could take advantage of this data. And so we focus on the spreadsheet UI because we know that business, for the most part, departmental business gets done in spreadsheets. We joke that in the old BI world that the most popular feature was the button that said download to Excel, because this is where people do their work. They do pivot tables and scenario models and reconcile data, and then they send that file to someone else. And we wanted to bring that online. And we knew that the scale of the data was getting huge, so huge that you really could no longer use a client-based software like Excel. Uh, there was security and governance concerns. There was opportunities around collaboration. Uh, and so we built that. We built this initial version of Sigma being a combination of old BI and spreadsheets. Now, since then, we've gone into application development platforms and embedding and a whole bunch of other stuff we can talk about here. Uh, but that's kind of Sigma in a nutshell.
I'm curious what the product started out as, because I know even a few years ago you rebuilt the whole thing from the ground up. But what was the idea in the beginning? And I know it always evolves. Like, talk about the evolution of Sigma a little bit.
So we have two amazing co-founders, Rob Willen and Jason France, who met at Sutter Hill Ventures. And when they kind of left the nest, or so to speak, the idea was, let's go build something for the average person. They Silicon Valley is really good at building generations of tech products for tech people, but they really wanted to break free from that kind of the rhythm, if you will, that the Valley had developed. And obviously, coming from Sutter Hill, they had pretty good visibility into what was going on with Snowflake and thought that might be the market opportunity. And that still drives us today. So that was the core idea. Execution is where all the magic shows up. Uh, but in the end, and the mission we remain on, is that will be one of the products, and maybe one of the very few products ever, that is licensed to every single person in every department at every company, regardless of the vertical or your geography or your business focus at all.
So this, when we're looking at here, this it seems like it allows anyone to customize their data into a dashboard, right? And then one of those things that people are using it for is just, productivity, decision making, acting quicker. Can you talk about decision making? Like, how are people using this to make quicker decisions?
Yep. And we could go into different demos on the website that would drill further into this product. But what you're seeing here is a nice visual of the combination of a BI product, which of course, when people associate BI products, they think about charting, right? So here you see a bar chart and a donut chart on the bottom left. But the table, which is on the bottom right, the ability for an end user to click into that table and explode all of the data, which could be hundreds of billions of records, is unique, right? So no one has built that drill path. They've not predefined your question. You can just go into that chart. You can explode it to all of its drill down, as we call it, into all of its glory, get to a row level view. And then what you're seeing here is you can start changing that table. We have a feature called write back that is unique in the industry, and it allows you to add your own perspective, to that data. And that perspective could just be a growth rate. It could be a comment. It could be a reconciled value. It could be anything. You saw a little bit of our collaboration features when that red squiggly line went around the table. Everything that we got used to doing in Google Suite or Office 365, you can do that in Sigma. So you and I can live edit an analysis that we're doing together. We can chat about it. We can draw on it. We can invite others to do this with us. So that same idea of what I refer to as synchronous work, based in data that can do something familiar like a dashboard, but something more personal like a spreadsheet-based analysis that you would have done all by yourself, all possible in this one UI that you're seeing here. What you're not quite seeing here that we then branch off of this is if I have done an analysis and I want to do something about that, and I want to take an action, there's a whole then subsequent capability in the product where you can build workflows. You can say under this condition, I want to send this notification. I want to update this third-party application. I could build a form and collect data from people inside of my organization. We have had people replace brand name applications with Sigma.
So
We've had,
it's kind of real time then. It just updates real time.
and that is the beauty, right? All of the data that we're talking about here is live. All of this is happening in what's called sort of live query. So we're not caching anything. We're not removing it from your underlying warehouse. So this obviously improves accuracy. It improves the granularity because we don't have to aggregate it in order to fit it into your laptop Excel version. And it improves velocity because we're working together synchronously on this work. So we've taken a lot of the best of spreadsheets and platforms like Google Suite, the best of BI platforms and things like charting, the best of your skill set as a person that you've been building for decades in doing things in spreadsheets. And lately, we've added the best of the ability to build custom designed applications and just put them into this one platform that critically means you as an end user do not need technical skills to do any of this. There's no certification here. There's no code, right? There is just your ability to manage your own productivity by yourself.
Talk about clients and the evolution of clients. How has that ideal client changed over the years? Or maybe it hasn't.
It definitely has. And in fact, I think this is another way of asking a question like, how do you grow a business? Because we are pretty adamant that the best way to build software is to start in the mid market. And so the ICP for us, or the ideal customer profile for us, has evolved. We built the product for originally, for the mid market customer who, for the most part, was building their business in the cloud and it wasn't coming from a legacy product. They were simply making an assessment that was, I don't have preconceptions. When I deploy something in a public cloud and I deploy a Snowflake or a Databricks, for example, what's the best product to take advantage of those technologies? And inevitably, the answer was more Sigma than any pre-existing software application that had been around for 10 or 20 years. And so we really were thoughtful about things that we thought the world was going to become. Large data volumes, security concerns that need to be better managed, real-time collaboration, and then more democratization, which is a term that's been used in data and analytics for a long time, but never really realized. We've realized that. I can give you some stats later. But we wanted to build the product in that mid-market space where people's thought process was 100% forward-looking and not trying to mimic their past. Now, obviously, we've evolved the company quite a bit since then. So our customers now include, JP Morgan and, the largest of the large banks in the world, all the way to a huge base of those mid-market companies. And that's the natural outcome of continuing to build features and capabilities over time.
Where does chicken ERP fall into that?
This was a conversation we had as a side. One of my passion areas is that it becomes it's fun to walk, sort of tell your mom, JP Morgan Chase Bank has thousands of users on Sigma. And it just feels good. Everyone knows who the bank is and they understand it's hard to sell to those banks. So you've achieved something, right? But I think the thing that we should be equally proud of, if not more proud, is customers. We have a customer who's is a poulterer. They raise chickens, and they've built an entire ERP system on Sigma. It includes managing transportation, managing chickens in their coops, the density, the age. It manages the feed. It manages the weather patterns. They've put together an ERP for raising chickens. No software company was going to build this product for them, right? No one goes out and says like, I am the SaaS product for poultry. Uh, but these businesses are everywhere in the world and certainly in America. They have every need, just like another. Matter of fact, they have more of a need than other businesses to create automation because they don't have the time to spend, updating spreadsheets and mailing them around and just trying to keep the back office of their business moving. And the fact that it makes me very proud, the fact that these businesses look to Sigma and think, hey, this is a platform that was built for my ability who raise chickens so that I can now use technology to make myself more efficient. That is tremendous.
I mean, I'm just curious how they even found you and why they started using it. Do you even know? Like, why were they even looking to create this? How did they stumble across Sigma?
Well, here's a funny thing. I don't even know this customer. I know this from the metadata of what they've built. So I don't know the answer to your question. I can abstract your question and say that a lot of the customers that find their way to Sigma, they do so because of that original statement. They have moved on to a cloud data warehouse and they've asked the question, what should I do next? What takes advantage of this change? I've built on this thing. So what do I do now? How do we become a better company? How do I rethink what I'm doing as a business and not just continue to do the things that I was doing 20 years ago? The average customer, that's what they're doing when they come to Sigma. They're asking that set of questions.
Yeah, so they're maybe, have a cloud data warehouse or like what tools can I use to actually make decisions, kind of like what you were saying before, increase my productivity, have something I can look at, and they find Sigma. But also what's true is like there's people have been built on top of Sigma too, it sounds like. So
Yes.
how did that ecosystem come about then? There's thousands of apps built on your product.
That is correct. And those apps range from automating internal departmental processes. Uh, Jefferies is a well-known publicly traded company that actually also trades public equities that does trade reconciliation in Sigma, all the way to companies that are doing uh, building their actual business on Sigma, which means their interface to the world, is through Sigma. This could be companies that are monetizing data or whose core business is data, where let's say they're an asset management company and they need folks to be able to, as LPs, to go manipulate the data that they're providing on their investments. Uh, we've got customers who, like DoorDash, share their information with their suppliers. Think about Walmart and McDonald's through Sigma. So they've taken it us as a platform, which is effectively what we are, and they've taken it the last mile to make it customized to their business, to their processes, and customized it so that it is in effect theirs, and use that as a fuel to not only take advantage of technology from a data point of view, but us working with them also means that they're counting on us to continue to innovate so on their behalf, so that their product gets continuously better by virtue of our product getting continuously better.
You know, Mike, when I look at this, so we're looking at the company page, right? You have, Sigma leadership, you have the board of directors, you also have some of the investors, right? And so I think, it seems like it's a perfect fit that Snowflake would want to invest in you. And so I do want to talk about I've heard you talk about acquisitions before, and like you have so much growth, like you don't have time for acquisitions. But on the flip side, I'm curious from the investor standpoint, you know, how did you go about, I mean, raising capital is like another full-time job, right? And so talk about that journey a little bit and how you went about the companies that you wanted to have invest and be a part of Sigma.
It's a great question. You mentioned that it's a full-time job. What's interesting about raising money is that the amount of work that you have to put into the actual fundraising activity, I think, is directly corresponding to the performance you have, right? Or better said, it's inversely proportional. If your performance is great, and I think great performance means you have growth, you're efficient in getting that growth, you're good at managing your data so that you can share it with others. Fundraising is actually not that difficult, right? Because people they have signals, right? They look and they understand, okay, top growth rate, getting more efficient over time, great customer feedback on the product. Doesn't take much effort then. Everyone uh,
Are
tells
they
me we
asking
feel
you
good.
then why are you raising money? Because you don't need it. You grew to a X amount.
That's a great question. And the answer for that is actually usually quite simple. It is in our model of sales-led software growth, the answer is always fueling sales expansion. And it takes money to do that because you have to hire and ramp those reps. And if you're doing that at scale, it costs money. And that's why investors exist, right? That's why they want to participate. So raising money is, it's not focused on customers, and it's frankly not focused on product, which is where I like to spend my time. But uh, it's necessary. It does provide the world with a marker on your performance, right? Because you're getting this outside validation. Uh, and it's also an opportunity to bring new help to the company. One of the things we focus on when we raise money is who's best positioned to help us for the next few years. Uh, which is why we're constantly like bringing one or two new investors into the fold every round because we think they're better positioned to add. to the team.
I love to hear your thoughts on acquisition because I could see, okay, if Sigma Computing overlays on top of Snowflake. So it's like as they grow, we're going to grow. So like we have invested interest in this thing. If you
Yep.
look at like the top people who have built applications who are successful on Sigma, you could probably do the exact same thing. But talk about your mentality around acquisition.
I think it's first of all there are multiple types of acquisitions, and if the core of all acquisitions has in the past been around technology and product. And in software, it's very difficult to integrate someone else's product. We are very user experience focused. And it's easy to get to a Frankenstein, even if someone else has a really nice other product, it's not your product. So taking their great product and your great product, putting them together can make a bad product. So very difficult to think about a product-oriented acquisition. And without product, it's very difficult to think you're going to do another type of acquisition, which is usually like buying a customer base or some other sort of team. So we've never done an acquisition. I think that the only type that really would appeal to us would be what's everyone calls an acqui-hire, but this is more of a great team of people that want to join our mission, and we are more than open to those discussions. Uh, but almost to the 99th assurity percentile, it would be we would just shut the product down that they were building.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard you talk about it, and it makes sense because when you're growing at the clip you're growing, just focusing on the energy on what you're doing as opposed to divert energy to integration, diverts the
Yeah.
attention.
Yep.
So
You
I
can
get that.
ruin both, actually. You can ruin your own growth and the integration.
I want to talk about some pivotal decisions throughout the journey. Obviously, when we talked on the front of the interview, it's been tremendous growth over the past 3 years, but there was a point where it was like, I think when I was listening to you, it was maybe 800,000 in revenue. It was kind of staying the same. So talk about that point where you came in and where you started right before the inflection, where it started the growth. What was going on at the time?
So, as I mentioned before, on the positive side, the idea that fueled the company is the very same idea that fuels the company today. So, there was no need to change the mission. The mission was solid, the opportunity was there. In fact, I think one of the things that helped us was that while the idea was great, the market that was making customers think differently, and that was the adoption rate for things like at the time it was Redshift and Snowflake. Was gaining a lot of momentum. And if you put yourself back into that time frame, you remember Snowflake was the largest, and I think remains to this day, the largest IPO in software history. So you could really this was the group of people who were not just buying, but they were deploying data, and it takes some time to do that. And they're starting to think differently. Okay, so now we've got a great idea, a great mission statement with a market that is maybe willing to listen. So if you have these two things, the one you have to add to that is your product great? And to the credit of the team that was here when I joined 5 years ago, and in particular to the co-founders, it wasn't great. If the mission of the company was to sell to every single person, regardless of their skill set, your product has to be simple. And our product had three parts to it. You had to move from part one to part two to part three and back. That's far too complicated for the average person. They are not going to adopt that product. So you have to put yourself into the mindset of a founder that is 5 years into the work. They've got 40 employees and maybe about as many customers, uh, and the first decision we make is shut it down, right? Start over. But that's what we did. And I credit Rob and Jason. I credit the board, who is now in the sixth year of that investment. Uh, and so we shut it down in terms of adding features in June of 20. And we released the current version, well, better said, like the seed of what we have today in June of 21. And I would say that is really the marker, which is your reference point over the last 3 to 4 years, where we've gone from effectively 0 to 100. And getting the product right is the highest leverage decision that a team makes at a company. You can fix the finance process, you can fix the sales team, you can change the marketing, but your product is what customers are going to renew year after year. So getting that right was the most important decision we made. It was the inflection point for where we've gotten to today. And it remains, to this day, the core of most decision making at the company.
I'm curious, like how you communicated that, because when I think about it, it sounds so obvious now looking back, but like if I am a developer and I spent like 5 years doing this and you're like, hey, we're scrapping everything, build this from scratch, I'd probably start pulling my hair out, right? And be like, wait, maybe we could just tweak, maybe, and talk about how do you communicate that so that people aren't like, oh, all this work I put into this, starting over.
I don't think it was difficult at the time.
It wasn't.
Number
Okay.
one, because it's not like we were on fire anyway. But number two, what was interesting, and even before I joined the company, I had known some of the companies that had uh, used Sigma. And the same comment kept coming out, which was, this is a great idea. I can't believe someone has not built this already. And when you keep hearing this, you're like, okay, there's a need. It's so obvious, this need, that they can't believe that someone's not already done it. So then you just have to hold yourself accountable. It's like, are we really delivering that though? You know, and when you stare that down and you see the huge opportunity in front of you and you take an honest look at what you've built, it doesn't take a lot of communication. In fact, it's the opposite. People get really, really antsy about like, this isn't the best us, right? This was learning and we're going to use that learning, but this is not the best us. Let's go build a better version of this. And they get super excited about it. Uh, and that's what we did here. And there are some just super remarkable people who are not just great technologists, but they're great listeners and they're humble. One of the best cultural attributes of Sigma is that criticism is never taken defensively here. It's, what they say is feedback is a gift, right? And but it really is. If someone's willing to tell you what you could do better, you're like, that, thank you very much. I'm going to go package that, and now I don't have to guess. And we've done that really well from when I long before I started here, but certainly starting here and up until today.
Yeah, I remember one of my old high school coaches. I got really mad at him because he was like just laying into me. He's like, Jeremy, when I stop laying into you, that's when you should worry because I care, right? And so I'm
That's
like,
right.
okay, I always think about the same thing. It's just like
It's
taking that
true.
feedback. Um, so a pivotal decision was getting the product right, just starting it from scratch. What was another, we're talking going from 2 to 100 million. What was another pivotal decision in that growth?
Second decision is, where do you build that growth? And because you can't do everything, right? You're small. Uh, I'm a I'm a firm believer that the modern age of software is about user experience. And you get to remember, like those of us that grew up in software remember things like education teams, systems integrations, bills, certifications, like all the things that were like high barriers. Modern software is about no barriers. And if you're going to learn to build a no barrier product, you have to go to a customer that has no resources. And that customer is a small customer, right? It is a mid-market customer. So what you do is you go to the teams with no preconceptions, but also no resources. They don't have 10 people on the data team and 15 people on the BI team in our case, right? They've got a bunch of people who are doing 10 other jobs. So they're going to look at your product and be like, look, if I can use it, I'm going to use it because it's going to help me, but no one's going to help me, right? And this isn't my job. My job is this other job. And you make sure your product is so usable, so easily deployed. It would never be shelfware and it takes no overhead to maintain it. And then you just hone that, and you make that a core value proposition is how great the experience is of the product. And then you're mindful of that. You keep jamming features in, but you never lose sight of the fact that more features cannot mean more complexity, right? So then you just get better and better at it. And while you're doing that, and the product is getting better and better, the other thing you're doing is acquiring the logos. And you're not putting your company in a place where one attrition, in the logo base changes the financial trajectory of your company because you're just piling up logos. And that learning, resilience, credibility, the references and the use cases, this is what allows you to do the second major decision. And that is, in the end, all software companies are large enterprise software companies because that's the economic reality. You need to have larger deals. You need to be able to sell more dollars per sales rep, and they need to renew at a very high rate. And these are characteristics of large enterprise software sales. So then you have to know when is the time to go to large enterprise. Because when you do, you take your great product and you open the door to the 15 other things that every single one of these large enterprises is going to demand of you. And all 15 are going to be unique. They will never be leverageable. And you just have to take that tax on. But it does set you up for this new economic reality of growing the business. So that was, I think, the maybe the third most important decision that we made.
Before you go to the big logos like I know JP Morgan, the other ones, how do you reach the smaller people at enough scale to get to so where you're like, okay, now we're ready for the bigger logos?
That is a really good question. And for Sigma, the matter of fact, I generally believe this of technology. You really have to know the three whys. Why something, why you, why now? And if you really have these answers down, how you find your customers become a little easier. In our world, why something was I've bought Redshift, Snowflake, Databricks, and I think there's more opportunity than what I currently would put on top of it that's old. In fact, the thing that is old may actually limit my use of this new data platform because of its architectural constraints. And so therefore, we found our customers by virtue of understanding who their customers were. Who was a customer of Snowflake? Who's a customer of Redshift? Who's a customer of BigQuery? Because we think they're ready to be challenged by this opportunity. And we went to market with those partners to really communicate with customers what that opportunity was and why it was better for them, and frankly, why it was better for the partner also, right? As customers find new use cases to adopt their platforms. And that was a fundamental part of building not just the early business, it is today still a fundamental part of business, of building the business.
So rebuilding the product, just keep improving it, really zeroing in on ICP and then just finding out where all those people are living. And then it's going to the next phase, which is larger deals, larger clients. I don't know if JP Morgan was that a pivotal point in the journey.
One of the things that you find about selling, what do they say? Nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? And venturing into that gain is a very significant commitment for a small company. You do not sell these deals in 6 months. You sell them over years. And after the years of effort and building and selling and features, you get a very small deal. That's your reward. And from that small deal, if you do the right things, you can get huge deals. And so the decision had to be, we're going to go down this path because we can do lots of things. And those things probably would have generated more revenue at that time. But we are now confident enough that we're not going to die. We're going to do okay. And we can start, effectively kind of like we're going to save for our retirement now. We're going to put away some people time, some development time, and we're going to start investing. And we're going to invest it in things that won't pay off for 3 years. Now they started to pay off for us about a year ago, and the annuity on that is really significant because we're not now deploying, 10, 50, 100 licenses. We're deploying 6,000 licenses at a time. And those companies do a lot of diligence. They're very smart. And as a result of all of that, they also don't change their products every 6 months. The changes that we're making at these banks, they're coming from products that have been there for 20 years. So you have to get to that point where you're not living day to day anymore as a company, that you are able to sustain your necessary day to day growth while putting away or investing for growth that won't happen for 2 to 3 more years. But when it does happen, it'll be fundamental to making sure that that growth rate continues in those years. Because if you don't do that investment, it becomes almost impossible to sustain a high growth rate.
Talk about the evolution of the team over the past couple years?
Past couple of years, because that is a 5 year journey for me. It's not the last 2 years, and um, one of the hard things about being leaders at these companies, all of us on the team, is that there was a big debate, by the way, a few years ago. I think it was from maybe Robin Hood. I don't want to misattribute. And the whole debate was like, are your employees part of your family? And I can just say they're definitely not. You know, in fact, I think everyone has to look at their job and that if they're a manager, their teams, asking really one question, is this person the right person for the next 2 to 3 years? Not forever. And you keep asking that question. And some people are amazing. They evolve and they become the right person for the next 2 to 3 years. And that's magic because they're carrying all the history and they're changing and they're learning and they're adapting and they're giving you all those benefits. And there are some that just aren't, and they either aren't by skill or they aren't by interest. Some people are like, look, I really want to work for a company that has like fewer than 100 employees, and after that, it's bureaucratic, whatever, like great, go do something else. So changing the team is a question of two things. It's asking that question, uh, and then I diverge from a lot of people's philosophies when it comes to leaders in this thing I'm about to say. A lot of people say the words like you need to, invest ahead, and I don't imagine. I wait until long past it's necessary to have a leader in the seat before I put a leader in the seat, and I do that for one reason, and that is really smart leaders want to have impact. And if the area in which they're being hired to lead is not one of your two most important things, then inevitably that leader will be a distraction. And this is what you cannot afford when you build a business. So the key to that is just knowing what your top two things are, making sure those top two things have the best people, and kind of suffer through the other areas and just accept that consequence. And then when it becomes one of the most two more important things, then you hire that leader. And then you just help them like crazy, get up to speed as quickly as possible.
What about on the sales front? How has the sales team changed?
Man, that's the exact example. We had a CRO and well, better said, I hired a CRO who was here for a year or so and kind of outgrew that person and brought in a second one who's here a couple of years and helped build the early part of our enterprise business uh, and kind of outgrew him and now have an amazing CRO, Marcello Gallo, who brings a wealth of experience, from companies like, MongoDB and BMC and is as I like to call it, a disciple of, we call this disciple of the Godfather, who is John McMahon on our board, who is four-time CRO, very well known anywhere around software. Uh, and in sales, we had to follow the ICP. So that meant really building a very strong, increasingly shortening deal cycle around mid-market acquisition. And then, while that team was crushing it, and by the way, you should only make changes at a business when you're crushing it. You should never make changes when you have trouble, then you're already in trouble. Uh, so invest, and we started to hire sales leaders into the large enterprise space, but we gave them very low quotas because we wanted them to be successful, and we knew it was going to take time. Uh, and so we've been building that team. In parallel, we had to build fuel for all of those teams. So we built a strong partner organization. Now we're investing increasingly in marketing, which is something we've avoided in the past. So we brought a new CMO on board just a couple of months ago, even, already at $100 million, not having one. Uh, Fred Studer's doing great. So, brought a CFO on last year. We're very thoughtful, very incremental about the way we add leadership so that we have a chance of making them successful and we don't put the company through whiplash.
Mike, I'm wondering what are your expectations for a CRO? Like if someone's right now listening, they're like, okay, we definitely need a CRO or we need to hire a new CRO. When you go into it, what are you thinking? What are your expectations?
A couple of things, one of them are the things that I would hope they would expect from me. as well, which is like listening. Uh, CROs, we want them to bring some skills. Like we look for medpic, for example, or medic, as some other people use. Like that process. We is our sales philosophy. We want someone that knows that and has implemented it and knows how to manage it. We don't want to train that. We want that person to train the team on that. But what that person is never going to know is Sigma. So they need to come here thinking, I need to learn about this product and this team, these customers. So I take this knowledge that I'm bringing in. I've got to combine it with something it's going to take me 6 months, maybe more, to acquire. So learning is so key. And then we also have to change when this person comes on board. So we have to learn. It's not like we are what we are and they just have to assimilate. We all change all the time. So I think that's key. I think the second one is I use this term all the time. Most people know this term, which is broken windows. I am an adamant sort of broken windows believer. If you're not familiar with the term, this was the police commissioner of New York talked about dealing with quality of life crimes in New York City back in the Rudy Giuliani days. And if you were around New York at that time, if you stopped at a red light, someone would hop out and try to start washing your window and then hit you up for money. And it was just like little things that just made life worse, in New York. Uh, and I apply that to work here. And I want a CRO who's like, look, I'm not going to tolerate records, opportunity records that are not updated for 5 days. Like something happened. Why isn't it in the record? Because when I operate this company at scale, it can't be through word of mouth, right? It has to be documented. Forecast accuracy, stage accuracy. Uh, Another thing that we are very adamant about, which is maybe unique to us in the way that we think about sales leaders, is they are product managers. Our salespeople are product managers. We want to know, what use case are you selling? Who is the buyer? What did they say? How did they think about the competitor? Or what was their, what we call BATNA, like what was their best alternative? Uh, Give us what feature were we missing? What would have made this happen faster? We don't just want the deal. We want to be educated by the deal so that can be incorporated into the product or into the process, and we can make every other rep better, and that we can put ourselves on that flywheel of being better over time. And I think that is maybe a little unusual, when we talk to our sales teams about being product managers, but it is key focus for us.
I remember, I think it was in the tipping point, kind of what you were saying also, Malcolm Gladwell's book, where like
Hmm.
they were looking at those small little crimes that were whatever, jumping over the turnstile in the
Yep.
subway, that when they cracked down on those, it led to big changes. So I totally get what you're saying with that. What's interesting, Mike, about your journey is, it's pretty random when I think about
Yeah,
it, okay?
that's true.
Because, you studied biology and Spanish. You went on to teach for America. So, like, at that point in your life, what were you thinking you wanted to do?
Who knows? Honestly, I could spin this anyway. First of all, I'm from a really small place. I grew up next to a dairy farm. And where I'm from, the professions were doctor and lawyer, teacher. There really wasn't much else. And so I didn't have any idea. You could use the term business, but that was like this amorphous thing that you could do anyway. So I went off to college. I had no idea. Uh, to my sort of discredit, like I went through college thinking maybe I was going to be a doctor because like that was one of the things you could be. And I never learned anything else. So I still didn't know. And I actually took a fifth year at college, still trying to figure that out. And I got this grant. So I could do it for free, which just allowed me to kick the can down the road a little further. And I still didn't know after the fifth year, which is why I wanted to teach for America. So I had 2 more years of still kicking that can down the road. Now, to credit Teach for America, it's a tremendous program. I tell everybody that if you want to learn how to engage an audience, try teaching physics to English as second language students uh, in the seventh period of their day.
Yeah. Physics
Like,
to anyone, but yes, exactly.
physics, exactly. In the school that I taught at, people would show up, kids would show up as having just emigrated or immigrated to the US like the day before. And this would be like, I don't know, February 20th, and there would be a new person sitting there. Do you think they cared about physics? I mean, they're just like trying to figure out where they are. I had a tremendous time teaching those 2 years. I learned a ton. I hope the kids learned something.
What were
I've
some of the
lo
things that you remember? I'm sure it's like just similar to leadership principles that you were using to get their attention, to teach them. What were some of the things you were doing now then that you do now?
Well, actually, that's a really good question. One is it's all in the preparation. The thing about kids at some of the schools like this is you have to be organized. You cannot allow them to get up from their chairs and do something randomly because bad things happen, right? You have to, like, I know how I'm going to get this person, this group of kids to get this equipment to this place at this time. And you have to think through that, and really understand how this is going to happen. Everyone thinks that teaching is this inspirational thing, and I do want teachers to believe they're inspirational, but the reality is that 90% of teaching is logistics, and then you get 10% of inspiration. So logistics is number one. Get the logistics right because kids want to know, like, what's expected. What do I do right now? If you give them space to not know, they will fill that space, and it won't be good. Uh, Second thing is when you're presenting, you're entertaining. Like, be physical, move around. Like, it's hard for kids. They're sitting in desks. They're doing this 7 hours in a row. It's terrible, honestly. We have to. So learn how to present in a way people care. Even today, one of the things that I keep in mind is when I give a presentation, 80% of what people remember from that presentation is, did I like him or not? Not the message. You know, that was kid. The third thing that I took away from that, and I actually learned this honestly many years later, there was a student that called me many years after. I've not told this story ever to anyone on these sort of forums before, but uh, and she wanted to talk to me, and she wanted to thank me. She and I had had a conversation where uh, she was contemplating suicide, and I had no idea at the time. I mean, this person was telling me the story many years after I was a teacher, and this person's doing super well now. I almost fell out of my chair, you know, and I was 23 years old. I had no clue, but what I remember even today is like how impactful things that we say to people can be in a way that sometimes it's hard in the moment. We have to process in the moment more than what we think these moments can be, and the more senior you become in an organization, the more some of these words matter. And sometimes, by the way, sometimes they're misinterpreted, almost intentionally at times misinterpreted, I feel like. I remember this lesson a lot. I'm a pretty blunt person. It's not like I pull punches, uh, but it lingers in the back of my mind, that I am only blunt for the purpose of helping somebody. I am never blunt to tear them down. And I really want to believe that if I'm honest with them and direct, that I've given them maybe a tool to be better. And I always want them leaving like this was all supportive. You said this earlier in the call. I earned this a podcast, right? I am giving you this feedback because I care, right? If I didn't care, I wouldn't tell you anything at all. I wouldn't waste my time. So these are some of the things that I think about, but it was a very formative time.
With
Uh,
that person, was there something that stuck out to them? Was there something direct feedback that you gave them, or what was it?
I'll be honest, if she told me in this call that I'm referring to, I was so stunned that I don't remember.
It was just something of your influence that helped.
I don't know what I said. Honestly, I don't know to this day. And if she told me, like I said, I was probably still processing. 99% of my thoughts were, oh my God, if I had done something differently, this could have been a different outcome. And like, how did I not know, sort of thing. But um,
We never know what people are going through when we're talking
you
to them.
don't,
Yeah.
you don't, and I mean, I want people, as I said earlier, like when they work here, whether they are here next year or 2 years or 3 years from now, I don't know. And we all have to make decisions about that. I do want them, though, to be better under all circumstances. If they're still in the chair here, or if they go somewhere else, they're going to be better people having worked here. I really, really want that. And I want them. uh, to benefit from the best that we can give them, which doesn't always, matter of fact, many times isn't making them feel great or feel like pushing them, and knowing that they're learning is really that goal.
Mike, I know we only have a few minutes left. I have one last question. First of all, thank you. Thanks for sharing the lessons and the journey. It's really um, amazing to hear this. And people can check out sigmacomputing.com to learn more. My last question is just about resources, mentors. And this could
Mhm.
be mentors that helped you throughout your journey from a business perspective. It could be distant mentors, just like books that you learn from as well, or a combination. So, what are some of the resources and mentors that have influenced you?
Really has changed, through the course of my career. Uh, I did a lot. I never went to business school. I ended up learning all of the, and I quote, business school lessons out of books. So I was like, no, I'm not going to have the chance to be taught this. I'm going to have to learn it. And so at some level, mentorship just has to be self-motivated. And I will be, to my discredit again, I am the sort of person that needs to put my hand on the burner, even though someone told me it was hot. Like, I need to feel the pain uh, to really internalize the lesson. So I am a terrible mentee, I'll be honest. Having said that, I am pretty good at assimilating not just the things that people do well, but the things they don't. So I'm like, okay, you can learn something from everybody. And I write down these lessons. I have stories. I have a whole thing of anecdotes, that I just remember, and as a reminder to myself. It's almost like my daughter's what's she call it? There's like an inspiration page, and like Pinterest, for example. It's like I have almost like that in words in an anti way, um, but I will credit, for the last 5 years, you've flashed them up before. We have really amazing board members, and they've seen a lot. They've seen failure and still pursue it. They still are mostly failing, but the successes they had are tremendous. I had an hour-long conversation with a board member this morning, who is giving me the best of the way, his thoughts and the way he sees the world. And I appreciate every one of these conversations. They will never realize how much I remember, from them. In fact, I told one board member a story about another board member, something he told me 3 years ago. It was one sentence, but I have never forgotten it. Uh, and I've never taken offense. I have one, Mike Spicer is a legendary investor. He's not nice to me. But
He
for the
looks
exact,
intense in the picture, actually, on the
he's like that
website.
in real life, but it's not, but it's never like, I want Mike to be nice to me. I want Mike to be truthful with me and direct, because that sets me up for success. Brad, who's what I was talking to earlier today, I don't want him to tell me things that I want to hear. I want him to tell me things that are going to kill me if I don't pay attention to them, and things he's seen with other companies, that are further down the road than we are, and we have a chance to do something differently than they did. Uh, those I often wonder whether I express the appreciation for these learnings. Like, I never push back. It's like, tell me more. I can always decide myself whether to take advice. But what I can't decide is whether I get it, so I want to be as open as possible in getting it.
Love it. Mike, I want to be the first one to thank you. Everyone, check out sigmacomputing.com to learn more, and we'll see everyone next time. Mike, thanks so much.
Thank you, Dr. Weiss. It was a pleasure.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like 100 grand.